principal's voice echoed through the hallway as 17-year-old Sarah Mitchell sat slumped in the hard plastic chair outside his office, her knuckles still raw from the fight that had landed her here. 3-day suspension, Miss Mitchell. Your violent behavior is unacceptable. But what he didn't know, what nobody at Lincoln High knew, was that those same hands had once guided Navy SEAL operations through the treacherous waters of classified missions. When 2 men in dress blues appeared at the school's front entrance 30 minutes later, asking specifically for Commander Mitchell, the principal's world was about to be turned completely upside down. The girl he'd just labeled a troublemaker was about to reveal a secret that would change everything he thought he knew about heroism, sacrifice, and the true meaning of service. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah Mitchell shifted uncomfortably in the worn plastic chair, her dark eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor of Lincoln High's administrative office. The metallic taste of blood lingered in her mouth from where Jake Morrison's elbow had caught her lip during the fight, but she refused to show any sign of weakness. At 17, Sarah had learned to compartmentalize pain in ways most teenagers couldn't imagine. Principal Henderson emerged from his office, his face flushed with barely contained anger as he clutched a disciplinary form in his trembling hands. Miss Mitchell, in my 23 years as an educator, I have never encountered such unprovoked violence from a student, he declared, his voice carrying the authority he believed his position commanded. Sarah almost smiled at the word unprovoked. If only he knew that Jake Morrison's harassment of freshman Lucy Chen wasn't just typical teenage bullying, but a pattern of predatory behavior she'd been monitoring for weeks. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same tactical assessment skills that had once helped her coordinate special operations in hostile territories were now being dismissed as teenage delinquency. She'd calculated every angle of the confrontation, identified Jake's weaknesses, and neutralized the threat with minimal collateral damage, exactly as she'd been trained. But here, in the sterile environment of suburban academia, her actions were being labeled as nothing more than violent misconduct. 3-day suspension, effective immediately, Principal Henderson continued, sliding the paperwork across his desk. Your guardian will need to pick you up, and you'll require anger management counseling before you can return. Sarah's jaw tightened at the mention of her guardian. Mrs. Rodriguez, the kind woman who'd taken her in after her medical discharge, didn't deserve to be dragged into this mess. The woman had no idea that the quiet, studious girl she'd welcomed into her home had once commanded respect from some of the most elite warriors in the world. As Sarah signed the disciplinary papers with steady hands that betrayed none of the frustration burning in her chest, she caught sight of movement through the office's glass doors. 2 figures in navy dress blues were approaching the main entrance, their bearing unmistakably military even from a distance. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the familiar surge of adrenaline she'd felt countless times before. Something was happening, something that would change the careful civilian facade she'd maintained for the past 18 months. The school secretary, Mrs. Patterson, bustled toward the front doors with her usual mixture of curiosity and importance. Sarah watched through the glass partition as the 2 men presented their identification, their conversation too distant to hear, but their body language speaking volumes to some. One trained to read such signals. These weren't recruiting officers making a routine school visit. Their presence here was specific, purposeful, and somehow connected to her. Principal Henderson was still lecturing about personal responsibility and the consequences of violence when Mrs. Patterson knocked hesitantly on his office door. Excuse me, Mr. Henderson, but there are 2 Navy officers here asking to speak with someone named Commander Mitchell. The color drained from the principal's face as he looked from the secretary to Sarah, confusion replacing his earlier certainty. Sarah rose from her chair with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to command, her entire demeanor shifting in an instant. The slouching teenager disappeared, replaced by a bearing that radiated quiet authority. That would be me, she said simply, her voice carrying a new weight that made Principal Henderson take an involuntary step backward. For the first time since the fight, she allowed herself a genuine smile. Not the rebellious smirk of a suspended student, but the confident expression of someone who'd never truly left the service behind. The walk to the main office felt like crossing between 2 different worlds. Behind her lay the familiar territory of high school drama, pop quizzes, and teenage social hierarchies. Ahead waited the formal protocols and shared understanding of military service, a world she'd been forced to leave but had never stopped missing. Principal Henderson followed several paces behind, his earlier authority evaporating as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez and Master Chief Petty Officer David Tank Thompson stood at attention near the school's trophy case, their dress blues immaculate despite the October heat. Sarah recognized Rodriguez immediately. She'd served as his tactical advisor during the Kandahar operation 3 years ago, when his team had been pinned down by enemy fire and needed an extraction plan that seemed impossible. Tank had been there too, carrying wounded teammates to safety, while Sarah coordinated air support from her position on the ridge. "Commander Mitchell," Rodriguez said formally, offering a crisp salute that Sarah returned instinctively, muscle memory overriding her civilian surroundings. The simple gesture sent a wave of recognition through her that was both painful and liberating. "Sir," she responded, falling easily into the cadence of military protocol, even as she noticed Principal Henderson's jaw dropping open in complete bewilderment. "We apologize for the intrusion, ma'am, but we have a situation that requires your immediate consultation," Tank added, his gravelly voice softening slightly as he addressed her. "The details are classified, but Admiral Morrison specifically requested your tactical input." Sarah's mind raced at the mention of Admiral Morrison, not Jake's father, but the strategic operations commander who'd personally decorated her for her service in the Gulf. The same service that had cost her everything when shrapnel from an IED had ended her military career and forced her into early medical retirement. As the three military personnel continued their conversation in the coded language of operational necessity, Principal Henderson stood frozen in place, watching his understanding of Sarah Mitchell crumble completely. The suspended troublemaker was speaking fluently about tactical assessments, classified operations, and strategic protocols with two seasoned Navy veterans who clearly regarded her with profound respect. The conference room that Principal Henderson hastily cleared for their meeting felt absurdly small compared to the war rooms where Sarah had once briefed generals and admirals. But as Rodriguez spread classified documents across the cheap laminate table, the familiar weight of responsibility settled over her shoulders like a well-worn uniform. The mission parameters were complex, a hostage situation involving American civilians in a hostile region, with terrain that matched her expertise from previous operations. "The satellite imagery shows here, here, and here." Rodriguez pointed to specific coordinates on the tactical map, his finger tracing the same methodical patterns Sarah remembered from their previous collaborations. 3 entry points, but the approach vectors are problematic given the elevation changes and limited visibility. Sarah studied the terrain with eyes that had once guided special operations teams through similar challenges, her mind automatically calculating angles, timing, and risk factors. Tank leaned forward, his massive frame making the school's plastic chairs creak ominously. "Admiral Morrison said you developed contingency protocols for exactly this type of scenario during your time with DevGru," he said, using the official designation for SEAL Team 6. "The team on the ground is requesting your tactical input for the extraction plan." The weight of their request hit her immediately, somewhere in a dangerous corner of the world. American lives hung in the balance, and her expertise could mean the difference between a successful rescue and a tragedy. Principal Henderson remained silent in the corner, his earlier pompous authority replaced by stunned recognition of his own ignorance. The girl he'd just suspended for fighting was calmly discussing military operations with the precision of someone who'd clearly done this before. As Sarah began sketching tactical approaches on the whiteboard, using the same confident strokes she'd once used in Pentagon briefings, the principal began to understand that he'd been completely wrong about everything. "The key is here," Sarah explained, marking a critical position on the map with the red marker she'd appropriated from the school supplies. "If we can establish overwatch from this ridgeline, it provides clear sightlines to all 3 potential exit routes while maintaining tactical superiority." Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions under pressure, and both SEALs listened with the intense focus of professionals who understood the stakes. Rodriguez nodded approvingly as Sarah continued her tactical breakdown. "The timing has to be precise. We'll need coordinated diversions at these 2 points to draw attention away from the primary extraction route," she continued, her markers creating a complex web of strategic movements across the whiteboard. Based on the terrain analysis, I'd recommend a two-phase approach with primary and alternate extraction points, depending on enemy response patterns. As the consultation continued, other school staff members began gathering outside the conference room, drawn by rumors of military personnel on campus. Through the glass doors, Sarah could see her classmates whispering and pointing, their faces reflecting the same confusion that had overwhelmed Principal Henderson. To them, she was just Sarah Mitchell, the quiet girl who sat in the back of AP History, who never talked about her past, who'd just gotten suspended for fighting. None of them could have imagined that she'd once been entrusted with classified operations that protected American interests around the globe. Tank pulled out a secure satellite phone, establishing connection with the operations center, where her tactical recommendations would be implemented in real time. Commander Mitchell's analysis is being transmitted now, he reported formally. Estimated implementation timeline is 36 hours. The use of her former rank in front of her civilian classmates felt surreal, like worlds colliding in ways she'd never anticipated when she enrolled at Lincoln High. The debriefing concluded with the same formal protocols Sarah remembered from her active duty days. Rodriguez and Tank stood at attention as she provided her final recommendations, their respect evident in every gesture and response. The team will execute your tactical plan at 0200 local time, Rodriguez confirmed. Admiral Morrison asked me to convey his personal gratitude for your continued service to the nation. As the two SEALs prepared to leave, Tank turned back with something that looked almost like fatherly pride in his weathered features. Commander, you should know, the Kandahar operation you planned saved 12 American lives and prevented a significant intelligence breach. That mission brief is still being used in tactical training at Coronado. His words hit harder than any of Jackie Morrison's punches could have, reminding her that her service had mattered, that her sacrifice had meaning beyond the medical discharge papers gathering dust in her dresser drawer. Principal Henderson approached hesitantly as the military personnel departed, his earlier judgment replaced by something approaching shame. Miss Commander Mitchell, he began awkwardly. I clearly made some serious errors in judgment today. Your suspension is hereby rescinded, and I believe we need to have a very different conversation about your future here at Lincoln High. Sarah appreciated his attempt at redemption, but she also recognized that some bridges, once burned, could never be fully rebuilt. As news of her true identity spread through the school, Sarah faced a choice that would define her future. She could retreat back into anonymity, return to being just another high school student trying to fit in among teenagers who'd never faced life and death decisions. Or she could embrace the truth of who she was, a decorated military commander whose service to her country hadn't ended with her medical discharge, but had simply taken a different form. Walking through the hallways of Lincoln High that afternoon, Sarah Mitchell understood that her fight with Jake Morrison had been about more than protecting a vulnerable freshman. It had been about refusing to let her warrior spirit be diminished by civilian expectations. The SEALs who'd called her commander had reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten. Heroes don't stop being heroes just because they take off the uniform. They find new ways to serve, new battles to fight, and new people to protect. And sometimes, that service begins with standing up to a bully in a high school hallway, using the same courage that once guided special operations teams through hostile territory. Sarah Mitchell's story reminds us that heroism isn't confined to battlefields or limited by age. Sometimes our greatest warriors walk among us in unexpected places, in our schools, our communities, our everyday lives. They carry within them the same courage, tactical brilliance, and unwavering commitment to protecting others that once served our nation in its most critical moments. The fight that got Sarah suspended wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of her understanding that service to others takes many forms. Whether coordinating Navy SEAL operations or standing up to high school bullies, the heart of a protector remains unchanged. Her willingness to use her skills to defend those who couldn't defend themselves, regardless of the personal cost, exemplifies the true spirit of military service that continues long after the uniform comes off. If Sarah's story of hidden heroism and unexpected courage has inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of everyday heroes whose military service shaped them into the protectors we all need. These men and women walk among us, carrying within them the training, experience, and unshakable commitment to serving others that makes our communities safer and stronger. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to honor their continued service and discover more amazing stories of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of those who've answered our nation's call to serve.